Hello and welcome to Treasury Notes, a show dedicated to the latest news and information from the Office of West Virginia State Treasurer John Perdue. I'm your host, Gina Joins. Since the U.S. economy took a hit in 2008, the recovery has been pretty slow. The same could be said for the local economy here in West Virginia. Coming up on today's show, we'll talk with Mark Muchow from the West Virginia Department of Revenue for a closer look at the state's financial outlook. That's coming up in just a bit. But first, Treasurer Perdue is continuing his efforts to provide free financial education throughout the Mountain State with another Women and Money Conference. More than 100 people gathered at the Blennerhassett Hotel in Parkersburg on November 1st to get advice from a nationally recognized financial expert. Greg Stone has more from Parkersburg.
Setting goals isn't just for athletic teams, weight loss programs, and sales staffs.
First thing a financial planner should say, what are your goals? What do you want from life? What are your dreams? All a goal is a dream with a deadline.
Dee Lee, keynote speaker at the Treasurer's Office latest Women and Money Conference, says the number one goal is easy to identify.
If someone had only told us at 50, at 25 to start working on our retirement and not wait till we're 50, we'd be so much better off. Your number one goal as a woman should be a comfortable retirement.
State Treasurer John Perdue brought Lee and his long-running conference to Parkersburg's Blennerhassett Hotel in November, the 32nd installment of the series. Though Lee's presentation is broad, retirement planning and other late-in-life tips was welcome advice to these four ladies from Parkersburg. Jody Stewart, Tawny Stidham, and Jean Huber all followed close friend Kiki Angelos to the presentation.
You know, we're women, and we love money, so it's very important to learn more about money and how to save money.
What I've done, I'm just now living and enjoying it and hoping we're doing the right thing in our investments and all.
I am 80 years old and still interested. Am I doing the right things? Is there anything I can do better?
The Women and Money series made its third stop in Parkersburg. Previous engagements were in 2004 and 2008. All events are free, including meals, a copy of Lee's book, and a canvas tote, all the result of generous sponsors. Lee applauded Treasurer Perdue for making the series a priority.
It's been 11 years, and I feel very fortunate to have been with him those 11 years, and he has managed to get us to every corner of West Virginia.
If conference participants leave with one central piece of knowledge, it should be this, Lee says.
You can sum it up very simply. Either spend less than you earn or earn more than you spend. It's as simple as that.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. Well, while Treasurer Perdue's money conferences help people achieve personal financial security, it takes many professionals to keep our state's finances on track. Joining us today to talk more about the state's financial outlook is West Virginia's Department of Revenue Deputy Secretary Mark Muchow. Mark, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you joining us here on Treasury Notes.
Thank you, Gina.
Well, let's start by talking a little bit about what your office does, because I know oftentimes people do confuse the fact that we have a state treasury department, but we also have a Department of Revenue, which oversees several state agencies. Let's go a little bit more in depth about what your department does and how it operates.
Well, the Department of Revenue consists of 10 different agencies, and the agencies are generally involved in either regulatory activities, such as financial institutions, alcohol beverage control, or revenue generation activities, and probably about 95% of all revenue is generated through the operations of the Department of Revenue. A number of key agencies are involved in activities that are very important to the state. The Insurance Commission is involved with the Workers' Compensation Debt Fund, and also has been involved a bit with the Affordable Care Act. So as these new responsibilities come on board, the Department of Revenue take some of those on.
A lot of responsibilities, and as I said, some different responsibilities among the two offices between the Department of Revenue and, of course, the State Treasurer's office. Can you compare and tell us how there are some different duties between the two agencies?
Well, the biggest difference is Department of Revenue collects a lot of money for the Treasury, about $5 billion or so. And the Treasurer's Office is responsible for managing those funds, keeping them invested, overseeing the operations, the distribution of funds. There's local government distributions. The Treasurer's Office also has a program for the abandoned and unclaimed property that's outside of what we do in revenue.
Yeah, well, definitely it takes a lot of professionals, as I said in the beginning, a lot of professionals here in the state to keep all the finances in order. And it does take a lot of department and a lot of agencies working on the state budget. I know that throughout the several years past, people have been looking to you for projections on the state budget, and you've kind of been the go-to person when it comes to the state budget. Let's go into some specifics. We have some graphics today to talk a little bit about the budget outlook, and we want to bring up first a graphic about the federal funds as sources of revenues. If you could kind of just go through this and explain what we're looking at here on the screen. This is a nice colorful display of the sources of revenue.
This is estimated federal funds that are available for the state for fiscal year 14. That's the current fiscal year that we're involved with right now. It's about $4.6 billion. That basically accounts for about 1/3 of the total revenues that the state has to deal with on an annual basis. West Virginia is probably a little bit more dependent upon federal funds than the average state. The biggest slice there is the dark blue slice. That's for Health and Human Resources. And the biggest program there is the Medicaid program, which in and of itself is more than $2 billion of revenue that comes from the feds for Medicaid, for health services for the poor and needy. The other slices, the biggest slice beyond health care is transportation. Roughly half of the transportation budget in West Virginia for roads and highways comes from federal funds. And then there's various funds for other various agencies such as DEP for environmental protection, all the way down to education. K through 12 education gets a significant amount of pass-through funds. But these are very important. What's happening recently is we're seeing some sequestration going on. So I believe over time that the dark blue that goes for Health and Human Resources is going to expand with the Affordable Care Act and the extra Medicaid dollars that are coming from the federal government. Some of the other slices of the pie are likely to narrow a bit due to sequestration as the federal government tries to get its financial house in order.
And as you said, West Virginia is heavily reliant on federal funds compared to some other states.
No doubt. We're very heavily tied to the federal government. The recent federal government shutdown actually hurt the West Virginia economy a little bit more than average, partly because a number of West Virginians who happen to live in the Eastern Panhandle work in Washington, D.C., and they were temporarily furloughed. We also have the FBI Center up in Clarksburg, major federal employers. So the federal government does play a major role in West Virginia, not only in providing revenues to the state, but also in providing employment for our residents.
We have another graphic here that we want to get to. This is talking about the distribution of non-farming earnings back in 2012. And this graphic really explains a lot when it comes to the United States versus West Virginia. It might be a little bit hard to see on your screen there, but if you could kind of take us through what we're explaining and what we're seeing here on this graphic.
This graph is an illustration of the shares of non-farm earnings. That would be basically personal income, wage and salary income for residents. And the biggest, what I'm trying to point out here is that West Virginia relies more heavily upon government, mining, and healthcare for non-farm earnings than the average state. Nationally, those three sectors account for about 29% of total non-farm earnings. In West Virginia, it's 44%. And those three sectors have been under a little bit of turmoil recently. The mining sector is under turmoil as we're beginning to switch a bit from coal to natural gas in terms of natural resources. Government has been under a bit of turmoil with uncertainty on the policy front from the federal government. And healthcare is under turmoil because of uncertainty related to the Affordable Care Act. So all that uncertainty has tended to play a little bit negatively in terms of consumer confidence and in terms of our economic growth right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about that, I know that revenue estimates for fiscal year 2014, they were developed under the assumption of little or no revenue growth, I believe. How does that impact the state budget?
Well, a little or no revenue growth tends to be problematic for the state budget because there are some programs in state government that grow. They grow automatically. The state has very little control over the number of poor people who seek health care or the health care services that they seek. So the Medicaid program has a tendency to grow pretty fast, not only in West Virginia but throughout the country. Corrections has been a growth area in West Virginia. We seem to have more people going to prison than ever before, so there's pressure on the corrections front. So what happens is, in order to free up money for Medicaid and corrections to certain other growth areas, public defenders a growth area, budget adjustments are made in terms of non-growth areas, and over the last 5+ years, the overall general revenue fund has averaged only about 0.75% growth per year, and we've seen about 1.6% growth in the K through 12 education budget, 2.7% for health and human resources, and we've seen a negative 2.5% neighborhood for everything else, with the exception of higher education, which is about a 0% change. So we're basically taking from certain areas of state government in order to fund other areas of state government.
Not a great outlook when we're talking about the outlook of the state, but still not a completely bleak outlook either. Is there some hope that we can expect to see some revenue growth or recovery? I know we've been talking a lot about a slow recovery in the United States and right here in West Virginia.
Well, in West Virginia, we fared better than the average state during the Great Recession, and since around 2005, we've had employment growth, but the employment growth has only been about a little over 2%. Over that whole period of about 7 years, but it's predominantly been growth in the mining industry. Mining industry jobs have increased by over 30% since 2005. That's been the real growth industry in the state. Not only natural gas jobs, but also coal mining jobs. Unfortunately, because of low natural gas prices and environmental regulations and various other factors, there is downward pressure right now in terms of coal jobs and coal production, particularly in southern West Virginia. And that's having a negative impact overall on earnings for the present time. We see over time coal will eventually stabilize. It may take a couple years. Natural gas continues to grow. We're seeing recovery in our wood product sector, in our housing sector. And so eventually we will return to a more normal growth pattern of revenue. It may take a year or two down the road to get there. Normal growth for state revenues is pretty close to 4% per year. I'm projecting that once we get into fiscal year 15, fiscal year 16, we'll start to see revenue growth again, probably not quite 4%, maybe in around 3.5%, which will help us out. But for this particular fiscal year, at the present time, we're not seeing any growth. In fact, we're seeing a decline in revenue. Following last year where we saw a decline as well.
When we talk about 2008 and just the fact that so many people, so many states saw just such a dip in their revenue, we're a little bit better off compared to other states. Talk about how we compare to other states.
Well, we're better off in that the mining sector really was the growth sector in recent years. And if you look at the mining states around the country, North Dakota, West Virginia, Wyoming included, those are the states that did the best during this period of turmoil where we had downturn in overall economic growth. And that mining sector kept us above float. It also helped us with our rainy day funds. Our rainy day funds now stand at over $900 million. A good part of the rainy day fund monies have come from lottery surpluses as well as surpluses in mining related activities, including severance taxes that we enjoyed over a period of years. And that's been our big reason why we differentiated from other states. We actually grew faster than other states in recent years, to the point where our per capita personal income has moved up to about 47th. We used to be 49th. Our share of per capita personal income relative to the national average is over 80%. In only a couple years since the Great Depression have we been above 80%. The last time was the late 1970s.
So there is some good news.
Yes.
And we boast the rainy day fund as well. How much money do we have in that fund, and can you talk a little bit about how that fund works?
There's two parts of the rainy day fund. There's rainy day fund A, rainy day fund B. And the combined balance of both rainy day funds is in excess of $900 million, with close to 40% of that being in rainy day fund B. Now, rainy day fund B consists of tobacco settlement monies that the state received from tobacco companies years ago. And that's fairly static. The only growth there is investment growth. Rainy Day Fund A, which is the other 60%, is attributable to budget surpluses that we've had since, particularly over the last decade, but certainly since the early 1990s when we set up the Rainy Day Fund.
Yeah, we were talking about comparing ourselves to other states. We do have some competition when it comes to other states, and I think we have a graphic that shows that as well. Competition from Ohio, Maryland in fiscal year 2013, and then projected for fiscal year 2014. Explain what we're seeing here, Mark.
This is a graph of gross sales from lottery-related products, including racetrack, video lottery, limited video lottery, and the traditional games. And I believe the blue, if I recall right, is the it's either one of the other. Either the blue is the racetrack video lottery, and the red is all other. I think that's what it is.
Yes, that's correct.
We peaked overall in 2007. And since 2007, due to competition from other states, casinos are opening up in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Maryland. Due to that competition, we've seen a downward trend for the most part in lottery revenues, an average of about 3% decline since 2007 per year. And so far this fiscal year, we're down about 10% overall in terms of lottery sales, mainly due to increased competition coming from Maryland. Unfortunately, we've estimated that decrease, so we're well within that pattern. We've diversified the lottery a bit, but the lottery is going to be less of a factor in terms of our revenues in the future than it has been in the past.
All right, definitely something that our state is going to have to consider with some new competition when it comes to lottery. We have another slide we'd like to take a look at, another graphic here. This is severance tax collections through October, and if you could just kind of explain what we're seeing here. I think this is a really good slide to kind of depict about our severance tax collections and where we stand. This
is really two different graphs in one. They're two separate severance taxes. There's the regular severance tax that goes to the General Revenue Fund. It's based on gross receipts. And then there's special severance taxes that are for the most part based upon units of production that go for workers' comp debt relief. Last year, our biggest detraction last fiscal year was severance tax. We had a decrease of over $60 million in regular General Revenue Fund severance taxes, mainly due to a significant decrease in coal mining activity and some softness in natural gas prices. This year, we've seen a turnaround in severance tax, and through the first 4 months of the year, regular severance tax collections are up about $16 million compared to last year. With the decline still going on in coal, the decline in coal is softening a little bit, and that's being offset by a significant increase in natural gas. Natural gas activity is up about 168% compared to last year in the General Revenue Fund. And overall, that means that's the one tax that we're actually seeing positive growth from, whereas most other taxes we're actually seeing decline for the year to date. So that the increased activity in natural gas is this year is offsetting the decrease in coal, and that's positive for the General Revenue Fund. Overall increase is about 10 to 15% year to date.
You always hear the phrase cautiously optimistic. Is that where we're at right now here in West Virginia?
Cautiously optimistic. The economic indicators that have been put out by and forecasts put out by folks like Global Insight and West Virginia University point to improved economic growth during the next couple years. It's a matter of how fast we get there and how well it materializes. In the last couple of years, we've sort of been disappointed. The original forecasts have come in higher than the actual results. Of course, there's been a lot of headwinds out there, a lot of uncertainty. Until we get that uncertainty kind of solved, particularly at the federal government level, we're likely to still kind of have some areas of difficulty in the near future.
Very interesting conversation about the economics of the state here, and we would like to talk more with you, Mark, in just a few minutes, but we are going to take a quick break. When we return, more about the projections for our state's economy. Stay with us.
The primary function of the Treasurer's Office is cash management. People don't realize that we are the largest bank in the state of West Virginia. People have no idea how much money comes through the Treasurer's Office, over $13 billion now. I pride myself in being the best state in managing money in the nation. I'm the banker of state government. We are your bank. We take care of your money.
Welcome back to Treasury Notes. I'm your host, Gina Joins. Mark Muchow, Deputy Secretary of the West Virginia Department of Revenue, is here talking with us today about the economic outlook for the state. And we appreciate you joining us here on Treasury Notes as always. Nice to get your perspective from the Department of Revenue. Well, you are known, as I said earlier, for your close projections of the state's budget. Where do you look for growth? Can you give us some indications of where are the pockets you look for growth and where we can see those in the future?
Well, in the near term, we're projecting some growth in wood products manufacturing sector as the housing market across the United States increases. Natural gas will also continue to be a growth industry for the state. Healthcare is probably going to have a little bit of growth, assuming we can work through the Affordable Health Care Act issues that are outstanding. And we should still see some pretty good growth in some of our leisure and hospitality and service areas as well. Overall payroll employment is probably going to grow about 1% a year. And in terms of tax revenues, we look for a turnaround eventually in personal income tax. Personal income tax this year is actually down about 2.5% year to date. That's unusual. Personal income is usually our best performing tax in terms of growth, and we would project that to get back on target later on this year or early next year. We need personal income tax. That's over 40% of our general revenue fund. It's very important. Sales tax this year is fairly flat, but that's because we've eliminated the sales tax on groceries. When we get into the next year, we should start to see some pickup in sales tax revenues, whereas we've had little or no growth in sales tax for a number of years due to the phase out of the sales tax on groceries. Severance tax hopefully will continue to be a growth area. I think we're going to need growth in severance tax to help balance out some other weaknesses in areas such as lottery revenues. B&O tax revenues are projected to go down, continue to decrease. Corporate taxes are also falling a little bit and will continue for the next couple years, partly due to some phase out of the business franchise tax and some adjustments to corporate income tax rates.
And we just saw right up there on the screen just a few minutes ago, general revenue fund trends through November 1st. Take us through some of that. I know you actually mentioned some of those and what we're seeing.
What we're seeing through the 1st of November, we're 4 months through the fiscal year, is we're seeing the decline in most revenue sources. The sales and use tax is down about 0.5%. Now, if it were not for the sales tax elimination on groceries, we would actually be slightly positive there, probably about 1 or 2% above. Personal income tax is also down 2.5%. We're actually seeing negative withholding tax growth, which is a concern to us. Also, we had a one-time tax credit that's since been repealed by the legislature that is costing the General Revenue Fund significant amounts of money, both last fiscal year as well as this fiscal year, that weighs in on personal income tax receipts. B&O tax collections are down 10%. B&O tax relies very heavily on electric power generation capacity, and as certain capacity is being retired, particularly coal-fired capacity, the tax base is falling off a bit. Corporate income tax is down about 16% year to date. Corporate profits are rising, but not as robustly as in past years. In combination, we're also seeing, again, continued phase down some tax rates there. Severance tax is our best performer. It's up over 10%, and it's the one sign of growth. But overall, our collections, adjusted for some timing issues through the first 4 months, are down 1.3%, which means that for the rest of the fiscal year, in order to meet the revenue estimates, which are basically a flat line, and we need about 3.5% revenue growth the rest of the year, which is possible, but it's going to be a pretty high target to make.
So we're going to be struggling to meet that goal.
We'll struggle a little bit to get to the estimate this year.
All right. Let's go to our next full screen graphic that we have. We do have contribution to growth in non-farming earnings 2003 to 2012. Explain how this really shows what we're seeing here.
Basically, this graph shows how important mining industry is to West Virginia. The mining sector accounts for about 7.5% of total payroll employment. But in this last decade, it contributed about 15% of total earnings growth in the West Virginia economy, so double its size. Its average annual growth rate was in excess of 8%. And as a result of that, earnings in West Virginia outgrew the national average during this period of time. So our personal income relative to the U.S. personal income is rising faster. And that's one of the reasons why we moved up a couple ranks in terms of per capita personal income. and why our ratio of per capita personal income to the federal has improved so much to over 80%.
Technology plays a big part in how we conduct business here in the state. Have you seen that technology has made an impact on the state budget projections?
Technology has been important in terms of revenue collections. In recent years, we've gone to where taxpayers pay more of their taxes electronically as opposed to by the old paper check. And right now, this year, close to 80% of our revenue is coming in by way of electronic funds transfer, which is up about 2 or 3 years ago. It was closer to 70%. So over time, a greater and greater amount of revenue is coming in electronically, EFT transfers, and that means the timing of it is much more closely clustered around those due dates. So the end of each month, about the middle of the month, and around the 20th of the month when the sales tax is due. And that's helped reduce the amount of resources that are needed in terms of processing revenue-related matters. So the tax department's employment is down considerably from where it was 10, 15 years ago, with less need for temporary resources in the data processing area due to the fact that we have more electronic filing. Also in the budget area, West Virginia is migrating to a new enterprise resource platform. And I guess the budget is going to be the guinea pig to start things off, but under our new OASIS system that's being developed, the budget is the first part of the conversion, so we'll see how that goes this year.
We've talked a lot about WV OASIS here on the program as the state agency starts switching over to this new system. It is going to have a big impact on how the state deals with its finances, and its entire operating system is going to be one system now as opposed to many.
Right. It should be an improvement in efficiency.
Let's hope so. We do have a few more full screens if we could go through those. I think the next one we have here is General Revenue Fund collections. If you could just kind of explain what we're seeing here.
What we're seeing here, this is normally in West Virginia over the last 20, 25 years, our annual revenue growth is about 4% per year. In this situation, the annual revenue growth has been less than 1% per year. And there's several years there where you see decline in revenue. We peaked in fiscal year 2008 at about $3.93 billion, and then we had 2 consecutive years of decreases off of that peak. We rebounded pretty sharply when we get to fiscal year 2011, but since fiscal year 2011, we've been pretty much a flatline with little or no growth, and this is over an extended period of time, which puts significant pressure on the state budget. Fortunately, the picture for revenues at the local level has been a bit brighter at the state level. Local government revenues are rising a lot faster. Last year, the county property tax revenue base went up about 6.5% on average throughout the state. So local governments are doing a relatively better in recent years than the state government, which is not necessarily a bad thing because in West Virginia, we're a very centralized state. To the extent local government revenues can grow faster, that allows the opportunity for a little bit more decentralization as local governments have more resources. While the state government struggles, maybe the local government folks can help fill in the gap.
All right, a lot of challenges, but a lot of excitement as we look ahead to the state's fiscal responsibility that we're seeing here, and definitely a great budget outlook. Thank you so much, Mr. Muchow, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for Treasury Notes. Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can always get the latest news and information from the State Treasurer's Office. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or check out our blog for financial information. Connecting with the Treasurer's Office today at wvtreasury.com, keeping you informed on the Library Television Network. I'm Gina Joins with the Office of West Virginia State Treasurer John Perdue.